Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping right into the rapidly escalating situation between the United States and Iran. Now, we're taking a strictly analytical, impartial look at how these localized military clashes in the Middle East are actually creating some massive global economic shockwaves. We'll be relying on recent reporting and direct statements from both sides to figure out exactly what's happening, why it's happening, and, where this might all be heading. It's a super complex web of military strategy, economic pressure, and stalled diplomacy, but we're going to untangle the whole shebang step by step.
Okay, listen to this powerful declaration from Iranian leadership, because this right here is the immediate catalyst for the military tensions we're tracking today. Quote, "We will no longer remain in a defensive position. We will respond to every attack." For a long time, Iran maintained that its actions were strictly defensive, just reacting to incoming pressure. But with this statement, they're drawing a hard line in the sand. Tehran is officially announcing a major pivot, basically warning that they won't just absorb strikes anymore. They're going to step forward and retaliate. This single quote really sets the stage for this entire cascading conflict.
Section 1. Shift in Iran's strategy. So why the sudden dramatic pivot? Well, to understand that, we have to look at the breakdown of prior agreements. Iran's stance is that the underlying Memorandum of Understanding, basically the baseline agreements that were keeping a fragile ceasefire intact, have been directly violated by ongoing U.S. military actions. And because Tehran feels those boundaries are totally shattered, they've stated that those diplomatic frameworks are just no longer effective. As a direct result of that breakdown, the Iranian armed forces now have complete freedom to act and respond without any of the previous restraints holding them back.
Section 2. U.S. Strikes and Objectives. Now, to really grasp Iran's reaction, we've got to look at the specifics of the recent U.S. operations in the region. Over just a few days, the United States launched a highly coordinated series of airstrikes. And they aren't just hitting random targets, right? They are very specifically going after Iranian coastal defense systems, missile installations, and military infrastructure in places like Bandar Abbas, Chabahar, Avaz, and these absolutely critical coastal zones near the Strait of Hormuz. These are incredibly strategic geographic locations. The U.S. is systematically working to dismantle the coastal defense networks that give Iran power in these crucial maritime corridors.
And this perfectly illustrates the starkly contrasting goals driving the violence from both sides. On one hand, the stated U.S. objective is to strike these coastal areas to actively weaken Iran's military capacity, ensuring that maritime navigation in the Gulf stays secure and safe for international shipping. But if you look at it from Iran's perspective, because these U.S. strikes are being launched from regional bases, Tehran now views literally any U.S. base in the surrounding area as a legitimate military threat that must be neutralized. It is your classic, deeply entrenched action and reaction cycle.
Section 3. Iran targets U.S. bases.
Notice how the conflict zone is expanding here. Iran isn't just restricting its retaliation to a single area. We're seeing reports of Iranian missiles and drones directly targeting installations in Bahrain, which, notably, houses centers for the U.S. Fifth Fleet. They're also striking targets in Kuwait, Jordan, and a bunch of other Gulf nations where American forces are stationed. By hitting these diverse and widely dispersed locations, Iran is demonstrating its reach. They're attempting to apply massive, widespread pressure on the U.S. military presence across the entire Middle East.
Section 4. The oil supply threat.
Okay, so here is where this military tit-for-tat expands outward to threaten your wallet and the global economy. Everything hinges on this specific body of water, the Strait of Hormuz. It is one of the most critical maritime choke points on the entire planet. A massive percentage of the world's daily oil supply literally has to physically sail through this tiny, narrow passage. The American military strikes we just talked about, they specifically aim to weaken Iran's strategic grip on this exact geographic bottleneck. Think about that for a second. Whoever controls or even just threatens this single waterway essentially holds a lever over the entire global energy market.
And here is exactly how that lever is being pulled right now, as the U.S. tightens a naval blockade on Iranian ports, deploying forces to restrict Iranian tankers from moving freely. Iran counters with some severe warnings of massive disruptions to the entire region's energy supply chain. They are signaling loud and clear that they aren't going to suffer isolation alone. Well, the international markets hear these warnings, panic sets in, and boom, we immediately see mounting pressure on global oil prices. A military conflict translates instantly into very real economic anxiety for countries all over the world.
Section 5. Diplomacy versus escalation.
Right in the middle of these soaring economic stakes and active military strikes, observers point to a fascinating tactic known as strategic ambiguity. This is a deliberate policy where a nation attacks militarily, but at the exact same time keeps their opponent, and really the whole international community, slightly off balance by floating the possibility of diplomatic talks. For instance, the source material notes that figures like Donald Trump have publicly suggested negotiations are still on the table, even as American airstrikes simultaneously continue to pound coastal targets. It's a very precise strategy. It's designed to maintain maximum physical pressure while keeping diplomatic options ostensibly open.
So what does the current diplomatic deadlock actually look like? Well, Iran is totally rejecting new negotiations. For them, the condition is absolute. The U.S. must completely stop its military attacks and return to honoring the terms of previous agreements before any new talks can even be considered. The U.S., on the flip side, projects an openness to talks, but their condition relies entirely on maintaining that active military pressure and strategic ambiguity to negotiate from a position of strength. As long as these conditions are mutually exclusive, the diplomatic route is just completely blocked.
When we pull back and analyze the entire scope of the source material today, we can clearly see this conflict has dangerously evolved across three distinct fronts all at once. On the military front, we're witnessing expanding airstrikes and widespread regional retaliations. On the economic front, naval blockades are actively contributing to rising global oil prices. And on the diplomatic front, we are stuck in a total quagmire of stalled negotiations fueled by strategic ambiguity. It is a highly volatile, three-dimensional crisis.
Which really leaves us with the most pressing question of all. Looking beyond the borders of the Middle East and looking at our deeply interconnected world economy, we really have to ask ourselves, how much more pressure can the international trade system take? If diplomacy remains completely stalled and the military strikes continue to threaten the Strait of Hormuz, will these currently limited clashes escalate into a full-blown global economic crisis that impacts every single one of us? Keep an eye on this one, folks.